Good evening. The apocalyptic destruction in the Philippines is becoming clearer by the hour, with the death toll from Typhoon Hai-yan now feared to be more than 10,000. In the devastated archipelago, there's not just the sad task of finding and burying the dead, but also the daunting struggle of caring for the living.
Tacloban City, what's left of it. Village after village blown to pieces by the typhoon and then flooded by a storm surge that reached 6 metres. The streets are swamped by debris, wrecked homes, shops, tangled with whatever the sea left behind. Survivors had to pick their way past 2 massive freighters rammed ashore by waves whipped by winds reaching 300 kilometres an hour. The typhoon's path took it directly over Tacloban City, with its population of 200,000.
We need shelter, food, light.
We don't have everything. We don't have houses.
Misery and devastation seemed to fill every corner. Jenny de Cruz lost 11 members of her family.
I don't know what to do. Right now, all we can do is survive the day, but I don't know what will happen tomorrow or the day after that, or if we can continue to survive.
What they have survived so far, 48 hours of hellish gales and floods. There are queues trying to flee on evacuation flights, mothers with babies and tourists.
We walked from the hotel. It took 3 hours.
And there are lines waiting for aid that is starting to arrive. A bag of rice, a couple of bottles of drinking water.
Many of those that have survived were living in evacuation centres.
Some makeshift dignity for victims, a sheet of corrugated iron. 10,000 dead so far. Where it ends is anyone's guess.
Just looking at the devastation and looking at the communities that we encounter, that the 10,000 is probably a realistic figure, but it's very dangerous to start speculating even more. It's not unlikely that it will rise above the 10,000, but we simply don't know because we don't have access to all the hardest hit communities yet.
With hospitals refusing admissions because they have run out of medical supplies, the sick and frail are a priority on the Mercy flights. So many departures, but one arrival. A mother gave birth in the wrecked airport terminal. Finding food and water is her next challenge, as it is for so many here. Mark Burrows, 9 News.
And international aid agencies are racing to reach isolated communities all but wiped out by the typhoon. Live to Laura Turner in the Philippines. Laura, how desperate is the situation?
Good evening, Kate. Well, it is extremely desperate, as we've now heard all the stories of looting and people even resorting to having to steal from the dead just to get by. As you did hear, though, that aid is now trickling in. It's coming in on US military flights, also from Japan, and we know, of course, about the very significant contribution from Australia, that $10 million aid contribution. But as far as getting it through to these really remote communities, it has been a logistical nightmare for these aid agencies. They're telling me that power lines, telecommunications, roads, even airports are still very much cut off. And the really sad and ironic thing about this is that after a typhoon, the thing people need most now is water. But the aid agencies are also telling me that they're now, as we speak, trying to get into those really remote areas north of Tacloban City that we've heard so much about. Those are the areas they say they've not heard from at all. So they're preparing us that the stories, the devastation that could come out of those areas over the next few days could be even worse than we've already heard. Kate?
Thank you, Laura. Laura there in the Philippines.